Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Victoria Memorial Hall for this very special event this evening, where world-renowned Kenyan writer Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o is going to be in conversation with Dr. Sudhanva Deshpande. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful, interesting, engrossing, and enthusing session. Before we get underway, may I request all of you, I know you have all done it already, but those who might have just forgotten, could you please put your phones on silent mode or switch them off altogether, please? That would be helpful. I would now like to request Dr. Joyanta Sengupta, Secretary and Curator of Victoria Memorial Hall, to welcome the gathering here.
Good evening, everybody. It's a great privilege and honor for us to collaborate with the Seagull Foundation for the Arts to bring you this discussion session titled Secure the Base, featuring one of the most important authors of our time, Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, who will be in conversation with the eminent actor and publisher, Dr. Sudhanva Deshpande. Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o will speak on his recent non-fiction work, Secure the Base, published by Seagull Books, which contains essays written over a period spanning nearly 3 decades and covers some of the most critical issues of our time that concern not only Africa, but the whole world, including the role of the intellectual, the place of Asia in Africa, labor and political struggles in an era of rampant capitalism, and the legacies of slavery and the prospects for peace. We have tied up with Seagull several times in the past to bring you some of the best conversations we have ever had on this campus. And tonight, I am again greatly thankful to my co-host, Naveen Kishore, for giving us yet another opportunity to do so, to feed this constant culture of conversations, engagement, and criticality that it is our duty to share and spread in this world. That's all I have to say. Like all of you, I'm eagerly looking forward to a stimulating conversation tonight. Please enjoy the conversations. Do participate in them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joyanta. Today, of course, happens to be also a very special day. Valentine's Day coupled with Mahashivaratri. So that makes it all the more important that we are all here together. I would now like to invite the protagonists of this evening onto the stage. Dr. Sudhanva Deshpande, if you could kindly lead Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o onto the stage. All of you have come here for this evening's event, of course, know who these people are, but nevertheless, it is my pleasant duty to tell you that Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o is a world-renowned Kenyan writer, scholar, and social activist. His diverse body of work includes novels, short stories, plays, articles, essays, and poems, which have been translated into over 60 languages. His novels include Weep Not, Child, A Grain of Wheat, The River Between, Petals of Blood, and most recently, Wizard of the Crow. The Black Hermit was the first of several plays, of which The Trial of Dedan Kimathi is often considered his best. His play, I Will Marry When I Want, led to his detention for a year without trial by the Kenyan government. His nonfiction books, such as Decolonizing the Mind, has earned him a reputation as one of Africa's most articulate social critics. Ngũgĩ is a distinguished professor of comparative literature at the University of California, Irvine, and has received 11 honorary doctorates and numerous awards, including the 2001 Nonino International Prize for Literature. Ngũgĩ refers to himself as a language warrior because of his fight for the recognition of his native Gikuyu and other marginalized languages. So welcome, Ngũgĩ here on stage. And may I request Jointo to kindly present a memento on behalf of Victoria Memorial Hall to our guest for this evening. Also to Sudhanva. And if you could also felicitate Sudhanva Deshpande, please. Sudhanva is an actor and director with Jananatya Mancha, a theatre company founded in 1973 by a group of Delhi's radical left-wing theatre amateurs who sought to take theatre to the people. He works as editor at Leftward Books, a New Delhi-based publisher that seeks to reflect the views of the left in India and South Asia. In today's world, when everybody is so obsessed with the environment, it is very normal to hear about recyclists, but Sudhanva is a very keen cyclist as well, which is one of his passions and hobbies. Right, so welcome Sudhanva Deshpande. And with that, I would like to hand over the proceedings for the rest of the evening to Sudhanva Deshpande. And we will just remove this lectern from here so that people can get a better view of what is happening on the stage.
Great, super. Very happy to be here, delighted to be here. Honor, pleasure, words fail me. All right, as I said, it's a pleasure talking to a writer formerly known as James.
Who is that?
So what happened to James, Ngũgĩ?
Now, I don't really know what he's talking about, but he may be talking about somebody who used to write under the name James, and then one day he saw the light, and he regained his name, original name of Ngũgĩ or Thiong'o. But quite frankly, there's a long history to the idea of names and naming. Anyways, there's a long history. So it's not just the name, naming, language. But quite simply, when African people were enslaved in America and Caribbean and other places, the first thing that happened was that they lost their names immediately. They were named as the owner of the population. So if one was sold to a Mr. Brown, he became Brown, meaning the one who is owned by Brown. Then he was sold somebody else called Smith. He lost Brown, he became Smith, meaning the one who is owned by Smith, and so on. And naming is like a mark on somebody's body and identity, very much like the branding is branding the body of another, okay? And the same thing happened with the Christian mission enterprise in Africa in 19th century, where again, the condition of becoming a Christian was being baptized, but not by just any name. The name has to be English name, right? So, and like you have to lose your other name to acquire an English name in order to be a Christian. So when I look at that whole history of names and so on, and although I had written and published my first 3 novels, Weep No Child, The River Between, I think, and A Grain of Wheat, under James Ngũgĩ, the moment I saw the light, I could not go back to James. So what I did is something simple. I put James in an envelope. I know these days you don't use envelopes, but you know what an envelope is? Yeah, you must know. I know. Envelope. You put a letter there in an envelope, and on top I said, return to sender, and send it to England.
It must have upset your publishers quite a lot, because I imagine that as a publisher, if one of my star authors were to say, I'm changing my name today, and all the books that you have out there in the market by this old name, they don't stand anymore, you have to change my name, and so on. It must have caused a lot of people to be upset with you.
Yes, in a way, my publishers who were really, they were upset, because I say, please, now you are known as James Ngũgĩ. Everybody knows, why do you want to lose that? Then I said, if you see, I did not use exactly those words, but when you see the light, do you go back into the dark, right, to please somebody? So I said, no. And, I persisted, and people have come to really recognize and they respect Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. And I feel good when people say Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o, because it means Ngũgĩ, son of Thiong'o. So regaining one's name is really more like regaining one's sense of self. It's regaining a sense of self. It's very important. Later we can go into the whole question of the politics of the body, because it's part of that as well, right? Yeah.
And I imagine that this was around the time that you also decided to abandon the English language as your first language of expression. Is that correct?
No,
That
came later. It's another struggle. That, of course, there's a connection, obviously, because language is like a naming system. The name human body, but language names the world around us, the environment and other things. Again, we can go into that, later. But the language change really came about after I had published The River Between. Let me tell you a story, actually. I think it's much easier. Okay. In 1966, I was invited to New York for the first time in my life. I had just published 2 novels, The Weep Not Child, The River Between. And actually I was in the middle of writing the 3rd one, A Grain of Wheat. I was a student at the University of Leeds in Britain, a postgraduate student, University of Leeds in Britain. But I was being invited as a writer to an international pen conference. All young writers will understand what this means. You are, am I really a writer? So you sit properly, like a writer. How do writers sit? Is it like this? Is it like that? Is it like that? Or do they tap? So I'm saying this conference was actually important. It was organized by International Pen when Arthur Miller was the president of International Pen. It was during the Cold War, the big divide between the East and the West. But for the first time, writers from the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc, as it was called, were being invited, including writers were being allowed into USA, including writers like Pablo Neruda of Chile, who for 30 years could not enter United States because he was a member of the Chilean Communist Party. And for the first time, he was allowed to be there. And I was also there, yes, on one side, a student, on the other hand, a writer who does not believe that he is a writer, but he must be a writer because he is there as a regional guest of honor. So I want to tell you this story. So I'm sitting like this because I want to absorb everything, because I want to emerge from that place feeling like a writer, a real one. So I remember the last session, I'm sitting there, and who was, the people occupying the podium like this one was Adam Miller, who was chairing that particular session. The other one was Pablo Neruda, actually was there. And the third one was an Italian writer called Ignazia Sloane, Sloane. He's the author of the book Bread and Wine. Now, please, I just want you to imagine this. It was very, very important that I'm sitting there absorbing everything. And then out of my mind, I hear Sloane saying something like, complaining about the lack of Italian books translated into English. Okay. And then I heard something like, and you know, Italian is not like one of these Bantu languages that have one or two words in their vocabulary. What? I stopped all these poses, right? All right. Now I'm very upset. And I feel I'm here as representing Africa, and Africa has been attacked, right? So I had to speak. I had not planned to speak, but I raised my hand. And I was saying, I can assure you that, Bantu languages or African languages have more than two words in their vocabulary, right? And Adam Miller was quite generous. He said, actually, it's all right to praise your own language, but you don't really have to put down other people's language. Just, he was very diplomatic, but he smoothened the. So, after that, the joy of my being a writer is kind of no poses anymore. Huh? I go on a tour of America. I go to a place called Iowa. I meet a very young professor there. She was just made professor of French, I think, and her name was Gayatri Spivak. I didn't may have heard her name, but now she's become this huge personality all over the world. But I didn't meet her in 1966. But I'm still smarting under that attack on Africa, right? So I back to Leeds University, and I'm studying, but I also want to resume my novel. Then I look at my novel, A Grain of Wheat, and my God, in what language am I writing it? In English. But I just come from New York saying that African languages have a lot of vocabulary like any other language or languages. So what am I doing writing in English? So that was really the beginning of one very serious struggle with myself over the language thing. Although eventually, what made me turn to Gikuyu language was finally when I finally returned to Kenya and I started theater in a village called Kameretho, where I was a university professor, but on the weekends we'll go to the village, community theater. You'll tell us more about yours, see parallels. Then we wrote a play, I'll marry when I want. Then I was put in prison, maximum security prison. Do you hear that? The reason I'm saying this is because when you're in a maximum security prison, first of all, you lose your name anyway. No James even. Right? So I became a number. Right? No James, no Ngũgĩ, a number. And that's when really the decision to write in Gikuyu, I started thinking about the language very seriously. And the one decision I made, which I'm very proud of, was when I said, in this prison, and I'm here because of writing in my mother tongue, now, under prison guards, I'm actually going to write in an African language. I'm going to write in Gikuyu language in prison with paper and everything provided free by the government, which put me there. Although the paper they gave me for was not intended for writing, it was intended for something else. They call it toilet paper, but but it was good writing material, right? So that's how I came to really dramatic change. And that's when I wrote my first novel in Gikuyu called Devil on the Cross, or Shaitani Madarafaini. And by the before, can I introduce one person here? I met one doctor, who is a doctor who told me she wrote a PhD. Can you please stand up? Because she told me she's among the earliest to get a PhD, not only in my work, but works which included Devil on the Cross. So I was very excited. I was really very excited to meet you when you told me that. I went back to those prison days and I was thinking, why God, it was worth every struggle to write on toilet paper. Thank you.
So some of us who've read this book, Decolonizing the Mind, know the story about how you wrote this novel in prison. But you've only told half the story. You've only told us how you got the paper. You have to tell us how you got the pen and how you got language.
Oh, I was going to say I stole the pen from the guards, but then I realized it's not me. It's Wole Soyinka from Nigeria, who in a similar situation says that he stole a pen from one of the guards. Yeah, right. With me, it was like you could get a pen if you said that you are writing a confession. But I'll put it this way. Those of us who had, at least me, I was not given a reason for the detention. It's like, it's a very general statement, so I didn't know why. I could guess why I was in detention in a maximum security prison, but they didn't give us any reason. But you could get a pen if you said you are there to confess your sins. You are not told which sins, but you confess the wrongs you have done, or, so you could get a pen. So I got a pen to write a confession. But, yeah, in a way, writing novels is like a confession, isn't it? So I wrote a confession, but not the kind they were expecting, right? I wrote a novel instead, yeah.
Sure. And you've also spoken about how you got words in Gikuyu from the warders.
What I did was this. He's asked me such hard questions. I'm even sweating. Let me recover a little bit. I'll even get a bit of water.
Sure.
Good. Oh, okay. Let me put this in a context. So, first of all, let me talk a little bit about my Indian connection to what I did in prison. We're not allowed books in prison, I remember, except towards the end. But I don't have a magazine, I don't even remember the name, smuggled into prison. And there was an article by Tagore. You know Tagore? Tagore? Huh? You don't know him? I can take you there. You take the north, south. Anyway, I can tell you how to get to his house. But I know you know him, of course. And in this article, it's not by him, but he was narrating a story about an Indian writer. I don't remember his name anyway, but apparently he was a young writer, and he went to see Tagore, and he was sort of young, sort of talking about how many languages he knew, like English, of course, both knew English, then Italian, French, German, Japanese, many languages in, impressive number of languages. Tagore is listening, and at the end he asks him, "Do you know your mother tongue?" He says, "Oh, no." Then he says, "Then you don't know any language at all," right? Now, that was actually quite important to me. That's my sort of Indian connection. It was very, when you're in prison, any little thing like that really can give you a lot of spirit and so on. Now, so writing a novel in Gikuyu for the first time, there are many challenges because there's no history of writing novels in my language. So it's like you're inventing a new language, more or less. Not new. You're using the same words, of course, the language is there, but not written form. When you write in English, there's a whole history of English literature before you, right? They are models, even if you differ from them. Yeah, but in a core language, there wasn't such, a history, and like all writers, you struggle with words anyway. Even when you write in English or Hindi or Bengali, you struggle with words anyway. That's, but even harder in some ways for me when didn't have that tradition of writing novels in Gikuyu. And but what did I do? I turned to my captors. I thought they gave us food for free. Not the best of foods in the world, but free. Bed for free. Not the best of in the world, but, well, for free. Huh? And they give us guards to guard us. Actually, this is interesting because you see prime ministers and being guarded, right? Now, I was being guarded night and day, right? So I said, the other thing I had to explain this: if you asked those guards anything about outside prison, they were mum. Is it raining? Is sunshine? So at some point, I stopped asking them about the outside. But then I discovered some of them were Gikuyu speakers. And they did not really know why I was there. I was put there. So I realized I would ask them, what does this and this word mean? Or what this proverb? And they start arguing. They are inside and they are sort of in the corridor. They are arguing. No, it means this. Oh, no, it means this. So I'll take notes. Huh? So I was using the guards also as my teachers. They did not know, of course, but, right? I would also try some, like, proverbs, the meaning of certain proverbs, and they would start arguing, and that way I would get to know more about that particular proverb. In other words, I used the resources that were around me, okay? Because in a sense, that's what all writers do. They use the resources around them. Mine happened to be resources under confinement, and I use those resources to my benefit. Although, under harsh conditions, resistance is very, very important. Because human beings, we must be able to kind of say no, even if whispering, no, because we're telling our spirit, no, I must not give it, I must not give up. That's human. You refuse to sort of to accept evil, right? So you try and resist. So again, writing for me in prison was also, in a way, a form of resistance, right?
It's fantastic. It's amazing actually how you turned everything that was meant to put you down into a strength, right?
Yes, it's like you. Okay, let me tell you another one which I used as a source of strength. In the prison where I was, actually it was one of the biggest prisons in Africa. And it was in some ways it's more like this building here, without the windows, and because it was very gray like this, but without the decorations and but gray. Everything was quite the same, and the food was the same every day, the same routine every day, the same clothes every day, and the mind revolts against. Or we live in a world of colors, I think. There's something strange about a colorless or one color world. One color world is
actually right now we are going towards that in India. A one color world.
No. Let's listen here. One color world is very. Let's do an experiment right now. Can you look at either the clothes you are wearing, or you look at your neighbor, or even me? But look at your neighbor. See how many colors they have on themselves, all new, right? Yeah, I mean, look at how colorful. How many colors is she wearing? See next to you. How many colors can you count the colors? Green, yeah, and another shade of green, and so on. Okay, and you, sir, can you stand up? Let's see. You want to see? Look, can you see how colorful? How many colors? Right? One, black, 1, 2, 3, and then this one, so many other colors, right? Maybe he's wearing about 10 or 20 colors, right? Yeah. Literally, look, and of course, when you go outside, like we're in Victoria Gardens here, and even in the street of Kolkata, it's very colorful, even very down sort of areas or whatever. Actually, what strikes out is how colorful things are, So think of, you may laugh, say, roses. Think of a world where there were only whatever you did were red roses all around you. No matter how far you looked, roses. It would be, oh my God, you start crying. No more roses, please. Another thing, right? Yeah, because multicolor world, this is what nature is around us and so on, So when in prison they give you only one color, it's actually anti-life, like literal anti-life, Now, so what I had to choose in terms of my attitude of mind. Do I write a novel in which I sound very angry? Or do I keep on cursing my captors? I don't want to become like those wars, So I'd find a clear contrast, a kind of antagonistic opposite to that which is me. Yeah. And I chose laughter, satiric laughter, because laughter is another beautiful thing we have possessed, So my novel is satiric, kind of satiric humor, right? Because I talk about a world I talk of a story where of a competition among thieves, and robbers, organized by the devil, okay? And the idea is, and present in this competition is an organization called the International Organization of Thieves and Robbers, whose headquarters then, I don't know about today, maybe it shifted, but then it was in New York, okay? But the competition was only for local thieves and robbers. The international ones had to give a crown to choose the 7 cleverest thieves and robbers, local ones, and the one who wins, will get a crown. What they do is they come in front of all the other thieves and tell how they came to steal, how they came to be robbers, okay? And also tell their vision of the poor. But at the same time, they are not ordinary robbers, okay? So, for instance, initially people who rob because they are hungry or who steal sort of chicken in a village thought it's a heyday to be crowned. So one of them comes there and say, oh, wow, I was very hungry once and I saw my neighbor's chicken and I stole it to go and eat. And he's ejected. They're not talking about that kind of robber. He's a robber who robs in millions. It must be a robber who robs not because they are hungry or without clothes, but precisely because they have all those things, so they want to rob more, okay? So petty robbers thrown out, only billionaire robbers are around. Now, I'll tell you one. I don't have the book here. I'd have read it to you, but let me tell you, one of the robbers, okay, I told you each robber has to come before the other robbers and say how they came to be robbers. And they must also give a vision of how they are going to expand robbery in the world, okay? So one of the robbers talks about how he robs the masses and how he became so wealthy. And he does not know, and then he becomes a philosopher in this way. He begins to wonder, I have all this wealth, all this in billions, which are stolen from the people. I should be able to wear more than one pair of shoes at any one time. But now I have only one pair of shoes like any other person, right? He says, at any one time, I can only put on a certain set of clothes like everybody else. When I eat, I can enough to be able to eat and eat and eat continuously, but one plateful or two satisfy them like everybody else. No, she's wondering, what is it that I have? Oh, and there's something else which worries him. I'll tell you this one, but I should maybe. What shall I do about this? The secret. Okay, let me try anyway. There's one. The one thing which worries him is this, he's fairly advanced in years, and he says, and he's a man, this one. He's a male. He's wondering, and me as a male, I have enough wealth to be able to be, are there any children here? Okay, I have enough money to be able to make love to thousands of women every night. But he's worried because even one, he snores very quickly. He sort of tries and then, right? And then he discovered something else, that there's a technology. This was when Bernard had discovered the heart transplant. So he has this vision, and he tells them what we can do is, in this country, we should have a factory for manufacturing human parts, right? Spare parts for the human body. So he says, that means a rich man like me could have, well, 2 or 3 mouths, right? Could have 3 or 5 stomachs, right? Or as a male, can have 2 or more. So that when the first engine stalls, he can start up the other engine. And so, right. But then his wife says, oh, that's very good, because the wives of the rich can be distinguished from the women, wives of the poor, but also there are many. When he hears, I said, no, what would you use 7 or 4? Okay, and that kind of thing. Anyway, you can read the rest in the book. So I use laughter really as a way of kind of making this resistance to this thing which is surrounding me. Like using, as you said, using the negative, or use the opposite of what is negative to create a positive. Yeah.
It also seems to me, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it also seems to me that shifting from English to Gikuyu also made your narratives more complex.
No, not necessarily, actually. Because a novel like, and the doctor can help us here, if you want, you can tell us. But a novel like, say, A Grain of Wheat, is actually a complex narrative structure, for instance. But what I discovered is this, that each language has its own unique musicality. And quite frankly, this is the beauty of languages, like those flowers we talked about. Each flower is a flower, no matter what color it is, And there's no flower which is more of a flower than other flowers on account of its color, okay, Yeah. So the same musicality in languages, each language has a unique Bengali, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, Malayalam, all those languages each has their own unique musicality, unique to themselves. So also is English, so also is Russian and Japanese and so on, What's wrong is when we say my language is the only one with musicality, right? Or the musicality of my language is more musical than any other language in the world. And if it's the language of power, like English, it is actually more of a language than any other language, right? And I say no. So I found Igbo language has its own unique musicality. And for me, discovering that musicality of my own language and using it was worth every single sentence, every single word of that novel. It's like I want to do something with my language, right? But I also have to say, languages, English is a very good language, so don't get, French is a very good language. Hindi is a very good language, Gujarati and so on. What's wrong with languages is they are being made to relate to each other on basis of hierarchy, hierarchy. Let me give you an example. When Japan, for instance, colonized Korea from 1910 to 1945, they made Koreans do two things. One, give up Korean names, take on Japanese names, more, especially middle class, and also Japanese language, right? But wait a minute, it's not only Japan. The English did the same thing. You remember, you know this, so but might be to remind you about Macaulay in India, 1894, the famous minutes on Indian education. You know that, right. Macaulay. He said, we don't want Persian and Sanskrit, despite all the right. English education. Why? Because we want to create a class of Indians, Indian name and everything else, but with an English mindset, right? The French did the same thing. They want French because they want to create a bond, a psychological bond between the people we colonize, the middle class, not everybody we colonize, and France, the psychological bond, right? It's there, Put it this way. Today, there are many people here who speak more than one language, right? If you go to university anywhere here or abroad and you want to learn, say, French, they don't tell you to first give up, say, English. If an English person goes to study French in Paris, the condition of learning French is not his forgetting English. There's no relationship. He said, okay, add more. But if you look at all colonial situations, from Ireland, Wales, Scotland, Native American and Maori people in Australia, Japan and Korea, that is the same. That in order to acquire the language of power and master it, you must give up your language. That was always the condition. And you are humiliated or punished or made to feel very ashamed of your own language. Right? But there's no, you and I know, there's no correlation between despising your own language and being a master of another language. There's no connection whatsoever. It's simply a question of power. Right? And this was the same. So, anyway, maybe bring me back to where I get very upset because we are made to believe in a colonial situation. We are made to believe that there's a connection between mastery of English and rejection of whatever language is one's mother tongue. And there isn't. What we want is not hierarchy, is not languages and cultures relating on the basis of hierarchy, but on something else, on network. You see, network is like when you hold hands. You see, like let's say, if you hold hands and there's somebody else, there is, you see, it's very different from, it's a contact, okay? But suppose I was sitting on him here, with him carrying me, it's still contact, but now he's carrying me, but, right? So, this is what I'm trying, the languages are beautiful, Gikuyu, English, what's wrong, and each has their own challenges. The problems is when they are made to relate on this hierarchy with the assumption that certain languages are more of languages than other languages, especially people being made to feel embarrassed about their mother tongue. That's something which I think is serious, is a negation of the very essence of what is human.
I think there's a lot of resonance in what you're saying from India. In India as well, we've had a very complicated history of struggles over language, not just between the colonial language and Indian languages, but also within Indian languages and so on. in your writings, you take a very strong position about African writers who write in European languages. You quote Chinua Achebe's gratitude to English, and I'll quote, "Those of us who have inherited the English language may not be in a position to appreciate the value of the inheritance," he says. And you ask, how did we as African writers come to be so feeble towards the claims of our own languages on us and so aggressive in our claim on other languages, particularly the languages of our colonization? Now, so my question to you is, these are words that you wrote in the 1980s. Is this something that you still feel so strongly?
Oh, yes.
And do you see the possibility of, in one sense, the empire writing back, or the colonized writing back to the empire? In other words, use the language of the colonizer to kind of subvert the narrative.
Yeah, they can do that.
Do you see that possibility?
Yeah.
Not really.
They can do that. But what they are, in the end, what they are doing, and what we are doing is expanding the possibilities of English language. There's nothing we can, okay, and I can't ever repeat this, that English language or French or Japanese, very important languages, but so also is Gujarati, so also is Kiswahili, so also is Zulu, right? Yeah. But they are, now, but for not lack of choice sometimes, there are many people in the African world, Asian world, who write in English. And even if they try to write in another language, they don't know enough of that language to write in it. Am I going to tell them, no, stop writing in English so you can start writing Gujarati? And you cannot even read a script in Gujarati? No, right? So let's just be clear, oh my God. I lost my train of thought. What were you asking?
So I was asking about whether you think it's possible to use the language.
Yes. Yeah. No. What we are doing is expanding the possibilities of English or French. And you can do that. There are people who write great works in another language. Conrad, whom I really admire, he was a Polish writer. He was Polish. He learned English at the age of 19. He went on to write those great novels, and to make a very big impact on, not on Polish literature, but on English literature, right? And some of us have learned from him, okay? Ireland. Let me give you a little bit about Ireland, just a little bit, to catch what we are together on what I'm going to say about James Joyce, okay? All right? Can I give you a little history? Not a long one, I promise. Ireland. Because Ireland was actually England's first colony. It's not India, and so it's Ireland. It's not Africa, it was Ireland. And from 13th century, English settlers were settling in a place called Munster in Ireland, and they owned land there. But Irish language was more vigorous and more literally stronger than English. And naturally, when you go to a place where one language is the dominant one, you are more drawn toward that language. That's a natural thing. If I stay in Calcutta here, it would be ridiculous for me not to learn the language spoken here, right? But London said no. They started passing laws prohibiting English settlers from speaking Irish. Then they passed another law prohibiting even Irish people who worked within what they call the English Pale, they were to speak Irish in that area. And even then, by 16th century, they had not quite succeeded. Then came a very famous writer called Spencer, Edmund Spencer. You know him, those who are English students? Hello, how many have heard of Spencer? Fairy Queen. Ah, I knew. Even yesterday when I mentioned Jane Austen, everybody knew. I do also. You know Spencer, very great poet or whatever, contemporary of Shakespeare, but he was a settler in Munster, Ireland. And in 1596, or 1595, thereabout, he wrote a book, A View of Ireland at the Present Time. In this book is a dialogue, in a kind of Platonic tradition of a dialogue between two characters. One, a visiting lord from London, and an English settler in Munster, okay? And they're saying, why is it after all these years we have not managed to tame the Irish? Why? So in a book, and you can go and read it now after this from the library, some of the sections is the kind of advice or devices they come up for erasing the Irish memory of who they are. And one thing they said was language, right? English on the Irish, okay? The other one was naming system. They said, it's in the book, they said we must make them forget about these O's and marks. The Irish call themselves Macmillan or Mark so-and-so or O. Donovan or something, right? Apparently that naming structure was very important had a meaning. So they think that if you destroy their naming system, they'll forget who they are. Now, so we're talking about 16th century, right? They're thinking about to use language and naming system as a way of erasing the memory, the sense of who the Irish people are. Okay. So it's a long history. Sure. What happened in India, what happened in Africa.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. On the question of language, you've been a novelist and a playwright as well. And so when you write a novel, you're basically working alone, right? And you're writing something that has to be read. Mm-hmm. When you're writing a play, on the other hand, you're writing something that has to be spoken. Yeah. And languages are that. Languages are not just read and written. They're also spoken and they're also gestured. As an actor, I can say that, I'm very aware of the fact that the language that comes most easily off my tongue, and not just off my tongue, but off my body, the language that sits most comfortably on my skin is actually Hindi. Mm-hmm. Even though I work a lot in English, I'm fairly comfortable in English, and so on. How do you see the connection between language, body, tonality, music, gestures, and culture?
Well, the problem we have all the time, me in particular, is all these things are connected. The body. This machine, well, I don't call it machine, we have it's incredible. We may not always realize, but we learn everything that we've done in this world. We learn for the body, our bodies, right? And take the technology of walking, for instance. Walk is a movement. We have our legs, correct? So when you've got a car or bike or something else or aeroplane, you're only enhancing a technology we already have naturally. The technology of making things, machines that make is this, and many other things. We can think of computer hard drive into our brain and memory and so on. The bodies are very incredible. It's the body is the first field of knowledge in everything. Technology, invention, everything, you know. Even when it comes to music, the rhythm, you know. When you watch, people always walk, because of our two legs, we walk rhythmically all the time. We walk in music or beats, right? And sometimes, let me show you. In the street of Calcutta, you watch people walk, all campuses, you know. Some are walking rhythm, and others are in a hurry. So you can actually, if you look carefully, you can see they are making rhythm with their feet. Some are making one whole beat. The others have a beat or whatever, a quarter. And sometimes it's very interesting just to watch, because you can see, if you are playing the piano, you can see that some are playing full note and half note, 16th note, and that kind of thing. And the rhythm is clear. When you're making things, pulling, okay, always rhythm. And then we do like that. We put, okay, we do like, and then you see my feet begin to move. Later, even without, I begin to do, right? Or whatever. So the body is really incredible in everything, music and so on. So, oh my God. Yes, can you ask me the question again?
With the subject of theater for a little bit more,
Okay.
Also because it's something that I'm deeply interested in. And you quote Peter Brook in your book, Decolonizing the Mind, and the book that you quote is called, of course, The Empty Space. And Peter Brook begins the book with this very famous quotation where he says that I can take any empty space and one person can walk across the space and another person is watching. And that's all that is required actually for an act of theater to take place. And as a street theater actor myself, I struggled with this idea for a long time, because that's not, I instinctively felt like there was something I was missing, or there was something that maybe Peter Brook was missing. And it came to me, I got the words to be able to articulate it when I read your book. And when I read about the work that you did in the theater that got you into prison eventually. And I started asking myself the question, what is it that you did in the theater that led you to going into prison? And the answer that I came up with is that actually what you were doing is demonstrating that spaces are never empty. Mm-hmm. You know, spaces are always charged. Spaces are spaces which are contested. There are struggles over spaces. There are histories of spaces. And of course, where we are sitting, we don't need to be reminded of that. So spaces can be claimed and reclaimed, you know, and they can be subverted, and so on. And this was really, for me, a turning point in my own thinking about street theater, about spaces, and so on. And thanks to you, it came from you. So could you speak a little bit about this notion of the not empty space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Space is the most contested of probably everything we do. Even our own bodies, when you think of it as space, again, we come back to the body, sorry, because the body is everything. The space of the body, you know, and think of even the location. Okay, think even the location of this building when it was built. Think of who was allowed to come in here, even when it looks empty. Even when it stood here empty, nobody was in there. You know, think of how many wars have been fought over question of graves. Okay? You think we pass graveyards, we think, oh, holy places and so on. Well, they are holy or whatever, but I'm saying, but they are not occupied by anybody except spirits, I presume. But they are not empty. Because the question of location, everything it's a contested, spaces, It's what I came to realize. The location of the National Theatre, the location of the cinemas, okay? The location of dangerous factories with emitting dangerous chemicals. You watch where they are located. In every country. Are they located where the rich, where the people live? Or are they normally located where poor people live? And so on. So even the location of residences, theaters, and so on. We are dealing also with the question of space. Yeah, you can find more about this. I gave a series of lectures in Oxford some years ago called Pen Points, Gun Points, and Dreams. And this is when I talked about the politics of space. And at New York University, where I was teaching for some years, for 10 years, I used to have in the theater department or performance studies department, I had a course called The Politics of Performance Space. Schools, very contested. Where is the school located? Who goes there? Okay. Look at ruins, or not ruins, but you find wars being fought as which temple will be on which. The people will come and say, you are building your temple on what used to be occupied by my temple. When the Spaniards went to America, they met Maya people and Native Americans. They used to plant their church on the ground, the sacred grounds of the Maya and Native American peoples. There are many other grounds they could have built the churches. No, but they want to be on top of the sacred grounds of Maya people. Right?
It's something that we are very familiar with in Indian history. Throughout Indian history, of course, right now there's for the last 20, 30 years, there's been a campaign to build a temple where a mosque stood. And in 1992, that mosque was demolished. And now again, there's whipping up of passions around building a temple where that mosque stood. But also all over North India, there are sites where you can see temples that have been built on earlier Buddhist and Jain, shrines and so on. And they in turn have been built on earlier sort of, call it pagan, call it tribal, whatever it is, right? So this kind of contestation has happened in Indian history all throughout. It's nothing new. It's something that we are dealing with in a very urgent kind of a way right now. It's a bloody question for us. It's a question that has led to the deaths of hundreds and thousands of people across the country. The question that I have for you next is to ask you a little bit about your location and the question of language again. Now, it's interesting that you chose to write in Gikuyu and gave up English as your primary mode of creative expression, and that happened when you were in prison, and when you were released from prison, you had to essentially flee the country, right? You were in exile, and you stayed in exile for something like 3 decades, roughly, right? Now, the question I have for you is really this, that in exile, how was your relationship to your own language, Gikuyu?
Okay, let me just give a sorry, but there are so many stories to tell. I'm trying to choose which one. It's like having many keys, and you don't know which one to. Anyway, let me first say, I was in prison in 1978. When I came out, I was not allowed to have any jobs anywhere in the universities and so on. In 1982 or 82, I went to England to help in launching my books, which I had written in prison, and a diary of prison. Then I learned that if I returned to Kenya, I was given this message: a red carpet awaits you at the airport. and a very red carpet for them, not like this, red, very red, okay? And of course I knew what that meant, that assassination or whatever, but I didn't want to try to know its meaning. So I stayed in London, yeah. Being in exile, in some ways, is like being in prison, in this sense, that in prison is internal exile, because still removed from the culture, from the living culture of the community you live in. Being in exile, forced exile, means you cannot return to the same community. In one case, you are inside prison, you cannot connect the community. In another place, you are outside the country and you cannot communicate, okay, or you're not in daily contact. So I found myself in the same challenge. I'm in London, an English-speaking environment. What do I do? I'm committed to writing in the Ngũgĩ language. And I said, I'd do it. It would be more interesting for me to write in Ngũgĩ in London, right? First of all, it was during my London days that I gave these lectures, Decolonize the Mind. Then I also wrote a novel in London called Matigari. When later the novel was published in Kenya, in Ngũgĩ. And people, the main character in Matigari goes around the country saying, where can one find truth and justice in this land? Something like that. The people talking about it talked of the character as a living person. In those days, even rumor mongering was banned under the Moi dictatorship in Kenya. Even rumor mongering was banned. But we are talking about a character who is going around the country asking, where can one find truth and justice in this land? So the regime then thought that he must be a real living person. So they said, get him, right? Imprison him, okay? But they found he was only a character in fiction, in a book. So they banned the book instead. I mean, they couldn't reach the character, yeah. So even in prison, in exile, when you try and break the walls of silence. And remember, it's also in exile that I wrote the Wizard of the Crow. It's a 700-page book. And I wrote it in Ngũgĩ language. Oh, it's here. And by the way, there's also an Indian connection to this novel, Wizard of the Crow, because the main character is educated in India. It's Pune, no? He's educated in India, I think in where? Oh, I've forgotten. But anyway, he's educated in India, okay? Chennai, oh, yeah, Chennai, yeah, right. Oh, have you read the novel? Yes, I'm sure. Right.
But I have to tell you there's another connection to India that you don't know about. And I have to tell you that you gave an idea to our esteemed Prime Minister. So here it is.
Oh, let me see.
How Modi ji was inspired by Ngũgĩ. The ruler, a staff and a fly whisk in his left hand, stood up. His dark suit was almost identical to that worn by Makokali. But on careful examination, one could see that the stripes were made of tiny letters that read, "Might is right."
What? Okay, I'll ask later.
Would you believe this? This is written in 2006.
Really? Okay.
Between 1996 and 2006 is when this was written.
Okay, there's another third Indian connection. Okay, shall I tell you? Do you know a very famous Indian epic called Mahabharata? Huh?
Everybody here knows
Of
the
course I
Mahabharata.
know. I'm
Of
joking
course you do.
because I know everybody here knows Mahabharata and Ramayana. Maybe not so many know. What about the Vedas? Do they know the
The
Vedas?
Vedas also, some of them.
Some
would
of them.
know, yes,
huh?
certainly.
Puranas? Upanishads? No?
Well, yes.
All the name, you don't know. Huh? You know
Not necessarily all the stories, but
yeah, but they know
yes,
roughly,
sure,
know, something.
sure.
Anyway, so that connection actually is Mahabharata. I was very fascinated by, again, you know the story of Mahabharata, so I won't go into it, but one of the instructors, of course, one of the lead characters, did you call him Arjuna?
Sorry?
Arjun?
Arjuna. Yeah.
And Drona is their trainer.
That's right.
He
That's
trains
right.
them, okay? All right?
He's the teacher. Yeah.
He's a teacher, how to, whatever. But then there's an Adivasi character called
Eklavya.
Eklavian. Yeah.
Eklavya.
I was very fascinated by Eklavian as a character because very fascinating. Because when you told me that the way he teaches himself how to shoot is by
That's right. That's right.
because Drona will not teach him.
That's right.
So he makes a portrait of. Tell
He
them.
makes a statue of.
Yeah.
Everybody here knows the story.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So Eklavya makes the statue, trains himself, and then Dronacharya sees what a good archer he is.
Better than Arjuna at the time. Yeah.
And then asks for, Guru Dakshina and asks for his right thumb.
Exactly.
It's a well-known story. Everybody knows that.
That act of disabling the poor or you deny them training. I mean, you deny them everything, and even through their own efforts, they make things. You disable them, so there's no competition. So it's not the whole Mahabharata, but just that aspect fascinated me in writing Wizard of the Crow. So that's another connection. Wizard of the Crow and Ekrivian and Drona and Arjun.
So you mentioned the Adivasi character in the Mahabharata. And my question to you is really about the idea of representation as a writer. This idea that, in India, for instance, we have a raging debate about who can represent who, right? If you're not a Dalit yourself, can you represent Dalit characters or the Dalit experience in writing? If you're not Adivasi yourself, can you represent the Adivasi experience in your writing? Similarly, if you're not a black person, let's say, can you represent the black experience? If you're not African, can you represent the African experience? And so on. And indeed, the question of gender. If you're not a woman, would you be able to authentically represent a woman's experience? And so on. And these are real debates that are happening not just in India, but across the world now. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Of course, they are very, very important debates about representation. But in a world where we don't relate on a bit of hierarchy, this imagination works in different ways. When I was in the also Seagull, they have this wonderful. Oh, by the way, have you been to the offices of Seagull publishers? You must visit. And their books, they are very wonderful thing to touch. So today at lunch,
Seagull bookstore and the Seagull office. He's saying you must visit that at some point.
Yes.
Naveen, be prepared for the hordes.
Yeah, But and everywhere, even in bathroom, they have these classic books. There's everywhere. No matter where, in the stairs, there are books staring at you, very wonderful books, and very well done, Oh, they did my book, and I keep on...
Gorgeous books, absolutely gorgeous books.
And I really like it, I keep on looking at it all the time. Also, not every day, but I do sort of look at it because very well, designed. But anyway, I don't know where I was, either in the bathroom, and so one of the books was Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. You know Jules Verne, the cat. And many things he wrote in that novel, including the idea of submarines, journey under the center of the earth or under the sort of leagues under the sea and so on, was all anticipating submarine. Mahabharata itself is really incredible in so many things. It anticipates through the imagination, including test tubes. You remember those children, 100 of them born in test tube, in pots, right? Or Caesarean, some children are born whole. There's one character who is born at 5. He comes from the mom. He walks out of mommy's tummy, and he's already fighting anyway. But many things are anticipated, including these nuclear weapons, flights, Garuda, all those things. So what I'm trying to say, under normal circumstances, imagination helps us to imagine what it would be like. Okay, male writers have written about women, some quite well. Women have written about male characters, some very well. Okay. Now, what is important is not, let's say, in case of gender, when the only people who write about women and credible about women are male writers. At one point, women say, "No, you cannot speak for me. I speak for me. Four of my kids." Okay, let me say, 4 of my kids are writers. I have 9 children. 4 only. Sorry, I should have said only 9. But now I'm 80 years, so no more. And one of them is a girl. And you look at their work, from the same experience, the girl's novel, the Fall of Saints, is dominated by women. You can see the perspective, no matter what, is really women. The boy's work, even when the perspective is male generally, So it just means that even in that category, women have to be able to speak for themselves. It doesn't mean a man cannot also try to speak, but not on behalf of. Okay? Right. But women who must be able to also write and tell their own story. In the same way, adverse people and others must be the ones also writing about themselves. But that does not mean that one cannot write about adverse characters, even sympathetically, For it's even that adverse character in Mahabharata actually, in a very interesting way, subverts the entire hierarchical system endorsed by Mahabharata, right? That one, in a way, they're subversive character within Mahabharata, So it can be done. But the key thing is that people must be able to must be able to tell their own story, because you can't tell another person's story in the same way that they might be able to tell the story about themselves, or there are aspects of themselves that only they can tell. Okay. The problem in the past, in the case of Africa, when Europeans arrogated themselves the right to tell the African story, and when Africans told their own story, "Oh, no, that's not really authentic. I can tell you a story more than you can tell it yourself." That's a bad attitude. To think that if you don't experience certain, you don't go through certain experiences, you think that you can do it better than those who have gone through that experience. I think there should be a measure of humility. But at the same time, you cannot say that imagination cannot try and imagine other possibilities, Otherwise, even Shakespeare did a lot of great things, he anticipated very many things about revolutions, about blood revolutions even, assassinations, things which are happening in 20th and 21st century. They are there. Macbeth, King Lear, so all those things, they are there, right? Right. So imagination is a very precious thing, and we can use it to empathetically and sympathetically, but we cannot say that we are the only one who can do that. We cannot say we male writers are the only ones who can talk about women. That's what.
I think that's wonderful for a writer who's asserted his identity in so many ways. To be able to say that you can also transcend your identity in some ways, and you can write sympathetically about experiences that you may not have necessarily gone through firsthand. It's a wonderfully liberating thought as a creative person, I think. I want to ask you about the title of this book that's been published by Seagull. It's called Secure the Base. That's the title of our conversation as well. And it's a book of lectures and essays on imperialism, on the politics of language. But what does the title stand for? What do you mean by secure the base? What are you trying to refer to?
Let me first of all say two things. First of all, essentially I was very fascinated by, they call it liberal economics or whatever, but I call it, what they call liberal, I call it capitalist fundamentalism in the world. And people may not realize it. Capitalist fundamentalism, which begins around the time of Thatcher in England and this other guy in America, Reagan. That era is when you begin to see capitalist fundamentalism and characterized by ideology of privatization. This is where privatization becomes almost like a religious creed. You must privatize. Governments must not in any way sort of interfere with the market. It's when the market becomes God, and with ministers and angels and priests, who watch, and psychologists who nurture the market and so on. The whole world becomes, So I'm very interested in this. And I'm also interested in the results of that whole notion of government hands off, except when your hands are on to protect corporate interests.
Absolutely.
The result has been, at least I have seen it, I've seen in America, I've seen in England, I've seen it in Kenya, that in the world, the gap between the rich and the poor actually is increasing and widening. This is what I've seen in America anyway.
Also in India, I mean, we've just seen the economic data for last year, and it turns out that something like 73% of the wealth earned by the country last year went to something like 1% of the Indian population.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So I was interested in two types of haves and what. I was thinking, if you look at the whole world, the resources of the world as a whole between nations are dominated by a handful of nations, mostly Western. They dominate in terms of consumption of the actual resources. Okay? And the gap between those countries and the poorer countries, largely from Asia, Africa, and is widening. But also within each and every country. Kenya, sort of America, England. That gap is really, really widening and deepening. You get extremely, very wealthy, incredibly wealthy people. I don't even know I don't like to use the word wealthy. I mean sort of billionaires. But you cannot build a society, any society, on billionaires and millionaires. In other words, you can't have a society of a billion, let's say a million billionaires and a billion poor people. That equation is unsustainable, whether within a country or in the world, because it's based on instability. No matter how you look at, no matter what faith you have, if you have either a structural basis of any society or the world, then inherent in that world is instability. That's how to be. It's that you get a billion, say 10 millionaire. Let me use millionaire. It's easier to grasp for me anyway. 10 millionaires, and 10 million beggars. And you said, that's the world you want, I want? Yes, I may want that world, but inherent in that world is instability. No matter how that instability expresses itself, but instability is inherent in that very structure. So this is what really fascinated me. And the whole idea of secure the base, I was either to secure the base in very many ways, but one of it is, of course, for countries, let's say in Africa, let me give you an example of Africa. Africa, you look at the map of Africa, it is the biggest continent in the world. People don't know this, but you look at the new maps, you can see it is the biggest continent in the world. You took the area of Africa, you can put the whole of Europe. I think Europe continent would be a province of Nigeria, probably. Right? But you can put the whole of Europe, the whole of North America and South America together, the whole of India, the whole of China, and there'll still be room for, I think, New Zealand. Right? That's really how big the continent is, really. But the resources of that big continent, from 16th century to the present, have been feeding the West. The resources of the continent, whether in the bodily form, in terms of the enslaved, in resource form during the colonial era, whatever, no matter how you look at it, it is Africa which has been, and I've been saying this everywhere, is Africa which has been donating to the West up to now. But the literature we read and everything is the other way around. It's Africa, it's Europe which gives aid to Africa. Let me give one example, because it was you can check in the internet, not me. When I learned about 2 years ago, through surfing the internet, I was shocked. It is this, that up to now, 14 independent African countries that were ruled by the French, still 14 or 50 years after, their national treasuries are still controlled by the Minister of Finance in Paris. Wow. 14. And I've met sisters like Senegal and I asked, is this true? And they will say, oh, yeah, it is true. Right? What does this mean? If you simply, it means that when they go to borrow money from France, they are being lent their own money, which they then pay with interest. Right? I mean, it's really, it's so ridiculous. But what is true of those countries is true of the continent as a whole. Right? If you bring Asia in and Latin America, then you see the picture. Europe has no resources, generally, or they are depleted. Right? So they depend on resources from. So I'm saying, let's secure the base for in terms of resources. Not let's make things with our own resources and then exchange with other countries on basis of equality. I'm a believer in give and take, equal give and take in among nations. we have to have a system of give and take, but on equal give and take. Not like the case of Africa, which gives all the time. Even in Western newspapers are telling us that if you look at the money coming out of Africa and the money going into as a whole, more money is coming out of Africa to the West than goes into Africa. If you take both private capital, government or thing, everything, the outflow is always bigger than the inflow. So I think about that base. But lastly, I also think about base in something else. And here I come to the body also. Although I didn't talk about it very much there, and look at one of the ways in which oppression takes is shaming people's body. By shaming, okay. Let me give another example. And then, children, do you have the bullying? I don't know how you bully system here. Do you have bullying in schools? Huh? Bullies, huh? Yeah, you have bullies here. We have it in Africa and other places, however, But I found one thing in common about bullying. It's always shaming the body of the one who is being bullied all the time. This was common, no matter where, is shaming the body of the one who is bullied. Okay? In other words, they are making that person have a negative relation to their own body, right? Have a negative view of themselves, destabilize their relation to that self, to their base also as human beings. Because our body is really, in the end, is our base, our mind, our everything. But when that's shamed, it's turned to some kind of negative, some almost like my own body is an enemy to myself. Then when I accept that, I'm actually almost half defeated before I even start, okay? So the question of base is more collective and bigger than it involves the body, it involves the resources of a country and so on. And it assumes that the only way you can get out of this is in a world where we, on the basis of equal give and take.
And paradoxically, that's exactly the world that we don't have today. There used to be a time when the word strong men used to be associated with dictators in Africa, and in Latin America. But today, you have them all over the world, from America to India to Turkey to the Philippines. We are all being ruled by strong men, yeah? And these strong men who are kind of also hell-bent on subverting and on destroying even the democratic sort of constitutions in all these various countries and so on. How do you see the rise of the right globally today? Do you feel that we are on the edge of an abyss, if not into it, or do you feel like this is the darkest point of the night, and that soon the dawn is going to break?
Oh, there's always, for every action there's reaction. So, it's not as if it's going to be like this forever, because, as I said, when you have that kind of discrepancy, that structural force, that structural disconjunction, that's the very big instability. So we're not stable. The world is not stable. Right now, we may think it's stable, but it's not. Because of that gap between, the widening gap between very wealthy countries, few of them, very poor countries, and within each country, a few middle class wealth, very wealthy, and the rest very, very poor. It's a very dangerous world. It will be unstable. But I keep on saying it does not begin today. We have to go back to that Thatcher era, Reagan era, and that's why I really would ask everybody, I'm not advertising I've not paid to advertise this book. But you want to understand capitalist fundamentalism and what is happening in the world today, you have to read this book analytically. Yeah. But of course, novelistically, I've already described that world of strongmen in this Wizard of the Crow, right? I have described the world of robbers and thieves in Devil on the Cross. Everything, and not just me, the others who have written similar documents. So it's not as if the evidence is not there. It's there. There was a time when the word people used to be something positive. Now you talk about people, In America, for instance, they've not property, I think property now has human rights. Property, I think, yeah. You got property, corporations. Oh, yes, sorry. Corporations are now legally have their rights or human rights or whatever, There's a subversion of what is actually human. Profit, and I talk about profit here in the Wizard of the Crow, has become really almost like it's a religion. And the market has become a kind of god. We might not disturb the market. You read newspapers, the market was very angry last night. Huh? Or the market was very disturbed. These psychological terms like being disturbed, angry, things like that for the market, right? It has been turned into a religion. It's part of this capitalist fundamentalism. It gives rise to other fundamentalisms also. Sometimes in alliance with it, and sometimes in opposition to it. But fundamentalism are the same, yeah. So we have to find a world in which the word people begins to have a meaning, right? We return the human to the idea of the people. And the market cannot be our God, or profit cannot always be our moral guide in how we relate to each other in this world. What about you look at the world in this way? That if you come to India, or you come to Kenya, and you find that everybody who wants to have a hospital bed can get access to a hospital bed. That everybody who wants to eat a meal and go to hunger can do that. That anybody who wants at least to have a pair of shoes and a pair of everybody can have access to that. Right? That everybody who wants to move from one place to another place can at least move to that place. What about if you look at the world, not in terms of those who are at the top of the mountain, but to look at the world through the quality of life of those who are at the bottom of the mountain? What about you look at progress and measure development, not in terms of how many millionaires a country has, but in terms of how elimination of poverty, right? Then you would look at the world very, very differently. But remember, when you're at the top of the mountain, like you're in top of this building, I'm telling you, you go up there, what they are seeing is very different from what we are seeing when you're down there, right? So you look at the world in terms of how that guy over there is, you're giving a very wrong impression of what he is seeing. Yeah, it's very different from what you are seeing, right? So the idea of the people, somehow or other, is to find a way in which it's no longer that word. It has got the dignity and the moral dignity it's supposed to have. And which, by the way, all religions at their very beginnings have this idea of the human. It's later they become subverted. Right?
In India, over a few years, you might be aware of this, there have been a number of intellectuals who've been assassinated. At least 4 leading intellectuals have been assassinated. Interestingly, they've all been people who've written and discoursed in Indian languages, not in English. There seems to be an overall atmosphere of fear in this country. People are afraid of speaking up. It's fantastic. It's really inspirational to hear you speak so fearlessly about some of the most important problems that the world is facing. You yourself have been the target of attacks. You have been imprisoned. As a younger person, you have seen your home being destroyed, members of your family being killed. As an older person, you have been attacked, your house has been burgled, your wife has been assaulted, and so on. How does a writer who actually is in a very vulnerable state or position, after all, writers, except when they're in prison, they are not guarded by guards, right? So how does a writer respond to this overall, culture of fear and intimidation? How does a writer write and speak fearlessly? In other words, and this really is my final question for the evening, what is the role of the writer in this very fraught, unequal, and very violent world that we seem to be living in?
When I was in prison, there's a story which I liked, and I even wrote about it when I was complaining about my prison conditions. I told this story in my book. In this story, I think it's a fable by this Danish writer, Anderson. It's about the emperor without clothes. You know it. The emperor without clothes. Huh? Right. Yeah, you know the story, how it is, The emperor is actually literally without clothes, but everybody is saying how beautifully he is dressed. Oh, look at how, And everybody, yes, very beautifully. Until one child says, but mommy, he has no clothes on. Right? And of course, actually, yes, he has no clothes. Right. I think writers are everywhere in the world, by the way. They are really, in some ways, part of the prophetic tradition. And prophets of various religious, faiths and so on, were always characterized by their fate was always some being exiled, some are being killed, sometimes, so they go and live in the forest and so on for many, right? Even the Pandavas were exiled, remember? In Mahabharata, for instance, right? So that actually has always been the occupation hazard of those who keep faith with the word. Because remember, a writer has nothing. Does not carry a gun, has no guard, so to speak, The only one has is their pen or the word. Because by writer here we mean people who use words and so on. But the word is very important. Because even over words, there's a struggle. Ideas, the most ferocious struggles in the world take place also at the level of ideas. Because people are trying to make people think one way. So there must be others who are saying, no, we can always think that way, But this attempt to make people think on one way. So what I'm saying, even at the level of the mind, there's ferocious struggle going on, At the level of intellectuals, there's nothing neutral about intellectuals and intellectual engagement. Whether we like it or not, there's a struggle going on. What ideas you have, what ideas you are holding, Whether you think prophets are God, and or whether you think law should serve the people or people serve the laws, it does matter. Even at the level of images, the struggle goes on all the time. We've seen so many people that, like in Africa, for instance, who want to, even their own faces, their own body, they want to fashion it in terms of a kind of Western ideal they have in their mind, right? At the level of images, there's a lot of struggle going on. And the writer really has only one servant, in a way, their imagination. This is the only tool we have, because he might end up by saying, think of the importance of art and writing to our lives. Let us relate to imagination. Imagination is the most incredible thing we have that constitutes the human. With imagination, we can even travel in time. Really, we can. And we do, actually, every day. We don't have to wait for a time machine to do that. We did a test yesterday. I was talking to some other people last night. We made a test, and they all traveled in time. And they look quite happy to travel in time. So you'd like to try? I can make you travel in time also. Shall we try? Give me 2 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. I
want us to travel in time. We shall not go very far. I want to take you to what you had for breakfast this morning. Do you see what you ate for breakfast? Do you see where the plate was? Okay? All of you can see right now as we are here. I know each one of you can see what you ate this morning or what bed you slept in this morning. I know you are seeing it, all of you, right? And you are still here. What has happened is our imagination has enabled us to travel to our homes in an instant, right? And we can visualize our own houses. We can visualize our bed. We can even visualize what we did before the mirror this morning, right? We see it, and we are back here. But the same imagination can also visualize the future and see possibilities, okay? Now, what nourishes the imagination? Okay, the arts are a product of the imagination. But remember that just as the body needs food to nourish the body, and the soul, call it, I don't know where my soul is, but somewhere here, the heart, I don't know, needs culture, religion, and so on, moral, whatever, to minister to the soul. The imagination also needs the arts, the stories, the poetry, the music, the sculpture to nourish the imagination. So imagination makes possible to create arts, but arts are also the food that imagination eats. And that's why you go into history, whether Asian history, Indian history, African history, anywhere, you go into even to the time of the cave dwellers, people are singing or making sculpture on rocks and so on, nourishing the imagination. Now, dictatorships are always trying to narrow imagination. So you can see the whole world now, there's assault on the arts and humanities. No, we don't want humanities and so on. They will try to shrink, to not nourish the imagination, right? But imagination needs nourishment because imagination is everything we have. It's through imagination. We can also imagine, just as we can go to our homes this morning and see what we ate, we can also imagine possibilities, right? But if you come like Voltaire, Oscar did, there's a character who says, we got the best of all possible worlds. That's what he tried to tell us, that this is the best of all possible worlds. No. The best of all best world is yet to come, and only human beings can strive for it. Yeah. Thank you.
For reminding us that writers are part of a prophetic tradition, for reminding us also that writers are childlike. Writers are the ones who, or artists, let's say, are the ones who are able to point to the emperor and say that the emperor is naked. For reminding us that writers play an extremely important role, artists and writers play an extremely important role in keeping us human, in nourishing our soul, and for being a living embodiment of all of this. Thank you very much, Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. It's been an honor, a pleasure, a privilege for all of us here to have been in the same space as you and to hear your very simple but very wise words. Thank you for the inspiration. Thank you for the courage. Thank you for the lovely, lovely literature you've written. And of course, last of all, thanks to the organizers, the Seagull Foundation, and the Victoria Memorial for making this evening possible. Thank you also for choosing me to be here, because this is not something that happens to people like me normally. I'm just an actor, you know. I'm not an intellectual, and so on. So thanks for choosing me, and thank you all of you for sharing this wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ngũgĩ. Thank you very much for mesmerizing us for nearly 2 hours now and casting this spell, and in the process, even further securing the base of your fan following in this city of Kolkata. And thank you, Sudhanva, for asking the right questions which elicited this kind of answers. So, thank you very much for making this evening very, very memorable for all of us. And thank you to the Seagull Foundation for the Arts for co-hosting this event with the Victoria Memorial Hall. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, a big thank you to all of you who have been such a wonderful, discerning and disciplined audience. There is some tea awaiting outside. There might be a possibility of demand outstripping supply. For those few who are in a great hurry to meet your Valentines, we won't hold you back. Or to say bambole with your colleagues. Okay, for others, please carry on the discussion outside. Thank you very much and good night.